Change and influence are so closely connected. Today I was talking to Brendan Burchard and we talked about the challenges. And I said, well, I always have a challenge every last weekend of the month. And for 2 months in a row, I had the influence challenge. And now I'm considering to make it a change challenge because this month for me is related to change, which actually was inspired by that same guy, Brendan Burchard. At some point, he said to us, how do you deal with change and how do you manage chaos? And I was like, well, let's find out. Now, if you remember last week, I was a little flabbergasted because so many things had happened and I was sort of stressed out. And the funny thing is that within a week, most of the things were actually smoothed out again. Not sure if that's the correct expression, but let's put it this way. I felt like I was thrown back in the past. And I was like, oh my God, really? This cannot be true. And I thought about it long and hard. Why is this happening? So I'm not sure what I explained to you, but in order to get an amount of money for something that I actually delivered a year ago, I have to be part of a professional organization, which is linked to me being a therapist. I used to be part of that organization. I got codes and then I stopped working with that organization. Things happened and life changed. And well, then recently I found out that those codes were eliminated. It was end of story. So I guess that happened 5 years after I stopped working with that one organization. So I had to figure out what to do next. And here's the funny thing. I found another organization, which is close by. And actually, I know the people from back in the days. And when I heard that first name, it's such a typical name. I was like, I know you. I only know one person with that name in that place. And I was like, that's got to be you. And then I looked on and yes, it was true. Now, the good news was I was a little bit worried because I did have training, but not training which is recognized by the Dutch organizations. Recognized as in they acknowledge it, let's put it that way. So I was like, oh, that's going to be a problem. And then the first thing I heard, well, that's not going to be a problem. But we do need to know if the training you had, the education you had back then is still valid because the school changed its name, became another school. And then today I talked to the people and they said, well, you've gone to school for 4 years, and it's at a certain level, so no worries, you can go on. I was like, oh, okay. So, I remember last week I was completely stressed out, and today I was like, okay. Now, getting back to the influence and the change. So, prior to going live, actually a few hours ago, I had been watching a training with Brendan Burchard. He was live. I was able to ask him some questions. So I said, well, you probably know who I am by now. And you know that I'm from the Netherlands, which he apparently did. And he actually said that he knew me for a while now. At the end, I sort of got called out on the fact that I had so many questions, but once I get going, I keep on going. That's the whole thing. And I was like, maybe I should have a little bit sooner, but I'm happy with the question I asked. So to get back to the beginning, one of the questions I asked was, what should I do? Because I know that when things can still improve, it's actually good to stick to one thing and not change it at all. And looking at the challenges I done and also the pages I made so people can subscribe, I was like, I'm not sure if I should do this. So after talking to Brendan, I decided, okay, I'm going to stick to influence because change and influence, they are intertwined. When I got back, I talked to someone on the phone and we talked about if it's possible to be on a flight wearing cast, which brought me back to my library of photos on my phone, which brought me back actually to Brendan Burchard. So at the end of 2018, I got surgery on my left ankle. It was the second surgery which I needed in order to be able to stand on 2 feet again and be able to walk without crutches. And I just came back from Brandon. So I had been in the US for 6 weeks. And I was looking at what did I do straight after. So I sort of went through the album up till 2019. And then I realized I'd been at Brandon's again in March, not for a long time. I think it was only like 10 days or something. And what I saw during that time, things that had happened in 2018 and 2019, it blew my mind. This was not just about having had the surgery. And fun fact, I actually had my cast changed multiple times, but one time it was made into green and red because it was Christmas time. So that seemed really appropriate. But I remember having been on a flight with my cast. So I was like, okay, where did I go? When did I go? So I looked up where my friends were. And I do remember that I actually went to a number of shows with them and figured things out. And 2019 was the year that I started to record videos. I went to Roy Martina, and then I went to a number of shows with my friends. Actually, I did a lot of things ever since I had surgery, before and after I had surgery. I had so many training. I had so many masterminds with other people. It was flabbergasting to see what I've actually been doing. It is a lot. So getting back to seeing all of it, seeing who I talked to, who I traveled with, those over here in Europe and also in the US, that actually was, well, it made an impact on me. I've been laughing, I've been crying, I've been relaxed and happy again. Everything what you can consider. I saw a lot of messages from a lot of friends, which really meant something to me. And I also saw that I was talking about the trip that I wanted people to make to come over to Europe just before Christmas. So we're talking about the end of 2018 when I first said I want to do this. Well, hopefully this year it's going to happen, really happen this time. So when I was thinking about it, well, a year later, 2018 was too quick. 2019, well, actually 2020, of course, COVID hit. And well, any ideas that I had were done by then. So then I had to go like virtual Christmas trip. But it showed me how long I had been thinking about it. And I remember talking about it and like, hey, I've forgotten about it. And now here I am again. So I talked to Brendan about it. I said, I want to do that trip. So he's got a grid like, okay, what are the things that you want to sell to people, as in services and products? So training, booklets. I've written a book, Uncover Your Mindset. And I was thinking about the courses, like, okay, how many courses do I want to get out there? That's what it actually started with. That's why I talked about the challenge. And I was like, it's going to be interesting. I already have 2 takes on influence. So I did 2 challenges on influence already. And I actually want to add a 3rd one, which is from the angle of change. Now, when I returned here, I had an unexpected phone call. Like I said, it was about someone who made me look through my photo albums because this person is going to undergo surgery, and he wanted to know if he would be able to travel. Well, I can tell you, if it's closed cast, then no way. And it also depends on how long you're going to fly. And that's what me got to look back at all those pictures. And then seeing all the things like, okay, this is what I'm going to work on. This is what I'm going to work on. And some of those things, which had to do with recording video, and then it was, there needs to be good light and good sound and whatever. And I'm like, oh, nowadays, yeah, of course, I probably should have used better light. I do have my light here, which I forgot to turn on. Actually, there are 2, and it doesn't always make me look better. So, okay, hold on. There we are. I don't know. What do you think? Is this better or not? Well, it shows me better, but I'm not sure. It looks like I'm a little tired, which actually is true. So, the trip, recording videos. And then I came across a video, and I was so immensely, well, I had a cold. I had a full-blown cold. And I remember I was only there like 10 days in the US, and I came back, had training again, and I was so stuffed. I felt so not good. I was like, oh my God. And I remember coughing all the time during the training and some other stuff. And while I was still in the US, there's a video of me, and I'm in Clearwater, and I'm talking about how there's a barbecue and how the food is really good. Yeah, Clearwater is a nice place to be. I can absolutely say so. Good vibe over there. But hearing myself talk, and I was like, oh my God, I must have felt so lousy. I do remember that I felt really sick when I got back. It was like, oh my God, this is flying again. Of course, we are flying, and then something like that happens. But also, I've done so much from 2018, the end of 2018, through 2019. I've traveled through Europe by car, by train. I flew in, seen so many places, and it was fun to be actually working with equipment, figuring out how does it work. Some of the equipment I've only used once, and then I stopped using it. Other things I kept using and kept doing. And it was also very special to hear certain sounds of, for instance, when I was in Sarasota and it was still early morning, and then hearing the sounds of the birds. Those are good memories. Those are good memories. But we're talking about change and we're talking about influence. And well, what I said to my coach basically was, if you talk about it and you decide to do a month dedicated to change, well, here we go. It's one change after another one. And being able to look back and see what actually was going on in 2019. And I actually saw some pictures that I'd taken where I was actually on the chat with Brandon during one of his lives. I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And so when we talk today, he probably knows that I already was there for the first time at the end of 2018. I was hardly to be missed because I was walking using crutches. I needed the help from everyone over there. Oh, they were fantastic. He's got the best crew over there. Yeah, really special times. And well, of course, I've been going back, not every year because we had COVID at some point, but well, as much as I can, I tend to go back because I love being at those conferences. And especially the last one in September really made an impact on me. Those 6 weeks in 2018 made an impact on me too. Let's be specific about that. So I was wondering, how much change did I actually make in those years? So I remember that I'd written my book back then, and then I redid it and had it published on Amazon as an ebook. As for the trip, I am more specific than ever, and I'm going to work towards getting the trip done this September. That's really what I want. This September, I want people to come to Chicago and then do the trip with me. The big difference is that for the first time, I'm thinking like, okay, this should be for business owners, small business owners, so I can improve the communication. I can't believe that I actually talked to Brendan about it. I mean, not that, oh my God, that's Brendan that I've been talking about. No, about what have I said? Because I can say so many things. And I'm beginning to understand why he usually chooses me last if he chooses me. And that's probably because, I keep on talking. So, yeah, I really want to get it done. And it was part of the grit that I was talking about. So I said, okay, I want to do that trip. What do I need to take into consideration when it comes to the legal stuff? And he surprised me a little bit because he answered like, well, first look what they say locally and then expand it to travel. And I was like, oh, that's a different view, because I always thought, okay, I need to look at the waivers that I usually sign when I'm abroad. And since I wanted to be abroad, it seems to make sense that I actually check what the regulations are over there and not over here. But he does have a point, and he's more experienced than I am. So, but yes, I told my coach this is the one thing that I want to work towards, and I said it to someone else too. And it feels so good to actually have a very specific goal in mind. Like, okay, who do I want to come over? Okay, small business owners. Why? Because they are not the people who can afford to hire HR because they don't have enough employees. Okay, but they do need to improve their communication often with their own employees so they get to value them more, so it works on both ends. And I was like, cool. So I talked about it. I talked about what to do next. And it's nice because, things are starting to make sense. But thinking about it, I actually came with that idea in 2018. And the reason I came up with it was actually because I was over there. And then I was like, okay, that means I need to get people from the US to come to Europe. So that was the other way around. And nowadays I'm like, I want to do three trips in the US throughout the year and one which is going to be in Europe. So I'm getting there, but of course, things need to be specified. So when talking to this guy who is going to have surgery in a few days, the one thing that he needed, because this is a big change for him, it's not so much that it's the first surgery, because it's not, but it's a different surgery. So on one hand, it's sort of the same because it's still the left leg, but instead of the ankle, the foot, it's the knee. And because of all the damage, it has to be put in a full cast. And I could tell that he had no clue what to expect. So the first thing that I said to him, so we talked on the phone today. I said, well, shall we call? Yeah, sure. And when we did, I said to him, you need to ask your surgeon what to expect. So how long are you going to be in a full-blown cast? And what's going to happen after? And is there a possibility that if you are still in cast and you need to fly, that they can make it into a brace? So that way it can be opened up a little bit because you have clasp and Velcro. And that gives just enough space to actually decompress, but it gives not enough space to actually be able to move around freely, as in everything can be undone from the operation. And we don't want that. We want things to go the way they should. So clarity, that was one of the things that I realized. He needs clarity. He needs information, what to expect, and specifically he needs clarity, because I experienced what it was like, right? You have surgery on my ankle. I had it twice. And at the end of 2018, basically, it was the second time. And yes, I went to see Brendan for 6 weeks prior to it, had a lot of training afterwards, and then got back in March again. Some things had happened during the training in 2018, and I felt like I needed to redo it because I'd missed a lot because of things which were going on over here. And going through the pictures, I came across so many names. People who are not around anymore. People with what's probably borderline. And, me and people with borderline, that doesn't always work out. It depends on how trustworthy they are, trusting they are. And they can flip, in a heartbeat. And I cannot handle that well. So the moment that they start accusing me of all these things, that's when I'm done. So I was like, okay, yeah, this person, delete. I was like, been there, done that. And no, I don't want anything to do with it anymore. The 2 times that I actually worked with 3 people who had it, but 2 out of 3 times, it was so disappointing, and I did so much for both of those people. And so, yeah, when I talked about what happened last week, I'm pretty sure that the person I helped a year ago also has borderline personality. it's the constant switching, which from trusting to distrust, which makes it so hard to work with these people. And of course, accountability, zero. Now, I'm not going to say that that's the same for everyone, but let's put it that way. I've recognized it in a few people. At the same time, during that time, I was switching from being paid by the local health insurance companies to they didn't want to do that anymore. So that's when I started guiding people locally. So yeah, I saw a number of people come by. Like I said, one isn't around anymore, and a few others I'm not helping anymore. They, well, I guided them as much as I could. Certain things improved, and sometimes we come at a point, and then it's like, okay, let's say goodbye. But looking back at it, a lot of memories also right now come flooding back of the things that I've experienced with those clients. Well, one I'm still seeing nowadays. So he's in such a better place. That's so good to actually know. And when it comes to training, some people I worked with very intensely, and then I stopped working altogether with them. But they were absolutely responsible in a good way for helping me out getting started up. So yeah, I do have to think about them with a fond feeling in my heart, because without them I would never have recorded video. One of them actually was the one who challenged me to record video, and the other one, when I had training, I said, okay, if I'm going to hang out with my friends who are musicians, then I'm going to record myself as well. So it's nice to actually see that shift in time when I decided to make those changes. And oh my God, what a specific 6 months those have been. So basically the last quarter of 2018 and the first quarter of 2019. So much things have happened. And so much things have changed. So getting back to the whole idea of influence and change. So when I'd been talking to Brendan today, I was like, okay, I'm going to stick to the influence challenge. I'm just going to do from the perspective of change. So that means that at the last weekend of this month, then I'm going to do a third version of the influence challenge. So there are all 3 days, and I'm going to see how I can combine them actually into one course. That would actually be kind of cool. I think it's going to be a good course, because they're all from different angles. So there probably is some sort of overlap, but I also do believe that there's a lot of new stuff in there. I know that in the past few months, with everything that has been going on, and especially being coach, I really changed my perspective on certain things. I did, however, see that I already talked about role models back then. And that was kind of funny, because the people I'm talking to nowadays, when Brendan is going live, those are the people who were back then also present when I was there in the US, and who were also present on the live. Especially one lady, she is called Sherry. I love meeting her. I love watching her. When we talk about authenticity, I mean, I know that I'm pretty much authentic. You know, the blue nails I have nowadays and the blue hair color. Not sure if you can see it right now. Well, it should be visible. I mean, they did it again just recently. Um, and of course, the blue shirt. Now, just look at the symbol, the pop up, blue hair, everything blue. So, yeah, I'm into blue, in case you'd missed it. Now, that's not uncommon when we talk about neurodivergence. So, those are the people who are more aware of sensory input. So sensory input is something that's more like flooding them, as opposed to other people. They're still sensory input, but it doesn't have that impact on them compared to when people actually are neurodivergent. Then it's like it's so much bigger, it has so much more effect, all the sensory input. And they talked about colors and color palettes, like what is the color that you like and that you want to surround yourself with. And well, one of those people who actually is still in my life nowadays, who was on those pictures too, he said, you are extreme with blue. Now, blue is supposed to make people calm. I've got the age of hyper, so it's nice to actually be able to calm down. And yeah, I'm extreme when it comes to blue. I totally agree. So, and that's a good thing. But yes, light yellows, you can already see it, sort of yellow beige in the back, the walls and the ceiling. Those are my colors. So dark blue and beige and yellow. And that's what you also see when you look at my color scheme. When you go on Instagram or you look at YouTube, then you already see those colors again. So it was kind of nice to read about that. Now, back in the days, 2018, 2019, I had no clue that I was neurodivergent. I'd never heard about that word anyway. Did I know I was on the spectrum? I knew about the ADHD. Absolutely. Did I know about being on the spectrum? Not so much. I think in the following years that one person actually said it. And not long ago, my brother said it too. I started reading about it and recognized a lot. So I was like, yeah, makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. So what does this have to do with influence and change? And the question is, what do we do with certain information once we get it? So I started out with the guy I talked to on the phone, that he needed to get clarity. So ask for information about the whole process, whether or not he could be flying. And basically, that's what I've been doing when I asked Brendan the questions I did, which were related to the grid. Like, okay, so I understand, the steps, the things that we need to do. And then I was like, but how about, in this case, the trip, the one-on-one coaching, all those kind of things. Getting back to the whole neurodivergence, getting back to change, getting back to influence, getting back to clarity. So I've seen the Matrix before. It's not the first time that I've seen it. I probably saw it in 2018 when I went to Expert Academy. And of course, it registered. But when I saw it again this week, I was like, okay, now I'm going to get it out there. I'm just going to work specifically with that grid. So since a year, I've been working on Kajabi. That's the new system where I get everything done. And well, when we talk about all those challenges and what I want to talk about and what I want to get out there. So if I want you to register, then I'll tell you, I've got a PDF for you, free PDF. And I've got some cool PDFs, by the way, 7 steps, how to deal with change. One, which is about clarity. And I know they work because I've heard it from people. They work. So for some reason, people like PDFs as a freebie. And yesterday, when I was creating another one of those, what they call opt-in pages, I was like, okay, I just have to put that page in there. And then today I was like, or actually yesterday when I was creating it, I was like, okay, but isn't this one too many? Hence the question I asked Brendan today. So getting back to clarity and influences and information, this week for me was related to clarity. So it went from change to chaos. And I had to get new information. I actually managed to mess up my old website. I also rebuilt it again in one night. WordPress is not that hard, but I have to admit that once you're used to Kajabi, then WordPress is a little bit, I want to click on it, but nothing happens. Oh no, that's true, because I need to go here and there in the menu, and then I get to see all else. Okay. But I did it anyway. And I realized that things had become so much easier because I'd done it so often, actually. So, and this time it was a pretty good website, because when I created that website, it was me getting people here. Well, actually, I was still working. And at some point I was working for a boss, and then I started to have people over here a few days a week. And then at some point I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with working for a boss. I'm done with all the changes. I'm done playing the piano and the violin. This is not going to work. That's when I said, so actually I was dealing sort of with a burnout back then. And I was able to work from home. I got this cool manager, but he was an interim manager. So he saw what I could do, which was so nice, because all those layers which were sort of pushing me from all sides to fit in, which didn't work. He was like, okay, skip them. But since he was interim, at some point he had to go. And then he said, okay, maybe it's time for you to consider something else. And that's when I said, you know what, I'm going to quit. So his response, take a month to search for carpets and other things. That was so cool. I still don't have any carpet here, by the way. So going through those pictures while I was abroad, I still had to do getting my invoices out there, making sure that the accountant knew what I had done. So I actually saw those amounts. And, it was like, oh yeah, that was when I still was receiving people here. But it was literally the change, that moment that was going on, to going and to guide people locally. So for several hours a week, instead of waiting for them to come back again like the next week or the next month or whatever it was. And I have to say, I actually like doing it like this because it's way more intense. And, I can support people by walking next to them. That's the way I describe it. I can literally be there, not to hold their hands, but to give them advice, to give them guidance, to show them how certain things are done. So I'm basically being a role model for them, so they see how things can change. That does not apply to everyone. Not everyone needs a role model, but some out there absolutely do, especially when they start to discover certain things about themselves that they didn't know. And today, when I was talking to one of my clients, it was actually kind of nice because so much has changed in the year that we started working together. She finally got recognition for what's going on with her. And so we talked a little bit about what I experience in daily life and what she experienced in daily life. So we have some similar symptoms. That's why I pretty quickly recognized what was going on with her and was able to say, okay, we are going to get this sorted out. We need to get to the bottom of what's going on with you and how you are going to cope with this. So we're talking about someone half my age. So she's pretty young. And to already be confronted with things you can do. So she actually asked me, how did you have a full-time job? And I was wondering, how did I have a full-time job? I don't know. But back in the days, of course, there were no computers, or there were computers, but it wasn't as intense as it was now. So I guess that made a big difference. And I remember that back in the days also, I already slept a lot. So that hasn't changed. And I told her about the times that I had to drive to the other side of the country early morning. And I said, I needed 3 alarm clocks. 3. I said, and one of them was a steam train because we didn't have mobile phones back then. So it was literally going choo choo choo, doom doom doom, ding 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 ding. Oh, I know some people who hated that thing. I loved it. It woke me up. That's what a steam train does. But it wasn't enough. I needed 3 alarm clocks. And the last one was actually a radio playing static. So I don't listen to the radio. I don't like listening to the radio. And one of the reasons is, well, there are 2 reasons. One of them is I don't like the talking going on all the time. And the other one has to do with my music is usually not played on the radio, except for when I'm in the US. Then suddenly I'm like, oh, this is cool. Oh, this is nice. Wow. Oh, there are some good stations. Well, big difference between the US and over here. So I remember that I sometimes would sleep through all of them and I would be late. Well, nothing much has changed. In fact, I'm more aware of the sleep I need and the fatigue that I'm experiencing. And that's what I told her. I didn't know any better than to just do it. And, boundaries, what's boundaries? So I was stuck at home a lot, dealing with wrists that didn't function anymore, hands that didn't function anymore. I couldn't open a bottle. I couldn't cut my meat, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what was going on. I remember going inline skating and the instructor said, yeah, we can go outside. And then clunk, I went off the curb on the streets and yeah, it literally bounced in. It veered in and it bounced back. And I guess that's where I've got the hernia nowadays. So many things, burnouts too, that have lasted for so long. And I guess that's why I was unaware. And basically, I would work, and then I guess if I think about it now, my advantage was that I worked shifts. So we didn't work like really 40 hours a week. It would be some number of days and then we would be off. And that's the time that I needed to recharge. But also going to the Academy of Arts or to other places, my mom actually said that I would come home and fall asleep. And I also remember driving back and, going like in the traffic during the traffic jams and like, okay, cold air, whatever. And it was, of course, in the middle of the summer, sun shining. I need to do something and then I can get off here, usually gas station, and then sleep. So I was like, yeah, I probably had it back then. I just didn't know how to manage it back then. So it's kind of funny to see someone who is the age I was back then and seeing how I dealt with things. Now, when we talk about influence, I didn't know about boundaries. No one taught me about boundaries. I think I learned about boundaries when I became a trainer just before the end of the previous century. And when I got my first burnout, and then something happened again in the year after, 2 years after. And that's when the personal development really, really started to sink in. So during that time in the following years, I learned so much about myself, whether it was because I got training, whether it was to become a therapist or because I wanted to become a coach. So many things. The medical fitness training, that was a huge part of it too. I got to understand how my body works, which was very convenient today because when we were talking about what was going on, I said, well, you talked about ligaments. I said, well, if you've torn one, I said, well, they may need to take a tendon out of the back part of your leg, the hamstrings. And, well, they need to attach that and you don't want to rip that. So, because when that happens, then you need a new one. And that's no fun because then you need another surgery again. So, those were the things that we talked about. And it was because I had that training, lots of personal development, lots of coaching, also from the companies, that I started to realize I need to learn to set boundaries. And that's actually what basically happened when I said, you know what, I'm going to quit. I'm done. And I had no idea that things could change so much from the moment that I decided to start working for myself full time instead of part time up till now. So then we get back to last week and those professional organizations. So I was a member of it. It was an organization which was far away. So it was always long drives just to get there. And especially when I couldn't walk anymore, which already started in 2014. So I had my second surgery at the end of 2018. And then it still took me a couple of years before I could get back to walking normally again. It has had a huge impact on me, absolutely. But I've come to understand about boundaries, about clarity, about speaking up. So many things have changed for the better. So it was so weird when last week I realized I had to go back to a professional organization again. And then some things happened and it was like, oh, well, some things start to make sense. I can incorporate it in my future. And that's what I didn't expect. And, talking to one of the people today on the phone from the organization where I became a therapist, well, actually, the follow up of that organization, we had a good talk because we talked about what people need nowadays, about seeing perspective and me guiding people so they have someone who speaks up on their behalf and who does believe them and who does take them seriously and is going the extra mile to make sure that life becomes bearable again and doable. And like I said, it's nice to actually see people change for the better and, you know, having seeing their future change for the better too. It's that's very rewarding. I can only, and it's also healing for myself because I wished back then that I had those people myself. Now, one of the other things that I wished back then was that I had people who would have been there for me when there was yet another change at work, when there was yet another manager, when there was yet another team leader. So I'm not talking about the first 7.5 years that I worked for this company called Pink Elephant. So yes, of course, I had my problems with my wrist and my back over there. I was still young. I didn't know any better. And I don't believe they did things on purpose. It's just I had to learn, that my body didn't work the way it should have. And it had a huge impact, but they have shown me so many possibilities at all the places that I could work, the places that I've seen and been. So yeah, I'm still, it's still my family. I don't see anyone anymore, but it's still my family. But the one thing that I really wanted to do was, and that was combined with what I'd seen in those 7.5 years, I I really want to get a training out there, a book, and focus that trip on better communication. And just to see how people actually can look at their employees. And today I was talking to one of my longtime coaching clients, and he said it. I am capable of letting go 70% of what I used to do can be done by someone else. And I've been surprised I let go and how it has turned out, all for the better. And I was like, yay, here we go. And that's what I want for other organizations too, and for employees too, that they can be happy, they can be understood, they can be heard, they can be seen, they can be valued. Especially in IT, there are a lot of neurodivergents who are also on the spectrum. It's the territory. I mean, you need to be highly analytical to be in IT, and you are highly analytical. Yeah, you guessed it. So, and those are not the best of communicators. So it's nice to make a change. And, I've always said I want to leave a legacy where people learn to speak up, speak out, share their story so they're heard, seen, understood, valued, respected. And on the other hand, that the other parties involved learn to listen for what the other one needs and learn to ask the right questions and learn to value what neurodivergents are good at. So, because they see things from a different perspective, they also come up with new ideas. You know, we wouldn't have electricity if Newton hadn't been a neurodivergent. Apparently he was. So, am I saying that good? No, Newton was from gravity. So then it's probably what? Well, I might um, mess things up right now, but you do get my idea, right? So it those people who invented all that stuff. I'm pretty sure I didn't say the right name just yet. That happens when I come up with something on the spot. Then there's a sort of like, well, I'm not going to say blackout, but it always takes me a little bit of time to get to the right person. And especially since I literally had to get back to my physics class, like, okay, who was again what? So, and, because all the symbols have been called after the one who invented it, I know that one is about gravity and not about electricity. The other one had to do with power. So I'm like, hey, what's the third one again? I'm like, is it Edison? I don't know. And I see this picture in my mind, and I'm like, it's neither one of those. And this thing, I'm a visual thinker, so I see the picture of who it is. Now, you might have a big laugh right now, and that's okay. I mean, I'm not afraid to tell you, sometimes I miss certain things, and it takes me a while to actually look it back up. And, afterwards, after this live, I'm going to check it on my phone, because then I need to know who was that one person again that I'm talking about. But quite honestly, it doesn't really matter. It's about inventions that never would have come to existence if people if people are the same all over, if people would always have been the same all over. It's the mere fact that Einstein was one of those people. He actually was a neurodivergent. That's the one I wanted to come up with. Anyway, regardless of Einstein and all the things that he came up with, it's being able to see and think outside of the box, which makes all the difference. And that's why people who think differently can be very valuable. You just need to know how to ask certain questions, how to get them to trust you, and how to make sure that when you communicate with them, they actually start sharing what it is you need. And well, one of the phrases I hear regularly is words are golden. So not everybody wants to say too much. So when they do, you want to get right answers, right? So, well, that's a long story having to do with influence and change. So in this live, I look back on 2018 and 2019 about the big changes in my life which took place back then, which still have an impact up till now. A good impact, by the way, because they shape my life into going into a certain direction, and that's good. I totally value that. I totally love that. And now, it's about, okay, how many times do I need to hear the same thing? Sometimes a little bit different because, with time things tweak and change. I get a better understanding. Other people get a better understanding. I learn from them. Of course, experience, all that stuff. So I think I want to conclude by saying change is not always easy, and change can take a long time. But if you stay working on it and you stay consistent, like I'm now doing with the Influence Challenge, then you'll see how much progress you are going to make and how positively it's going to affect you in the long run. Well, if you want to be part of the Influence Challenge and you want to get a free PDF, which is related to clarity and probably want to change, then make sure to sign up and go to ladylexi.com/influence challenge and register for it, or already, check out the other ones. That's possible too. I'll see you again next week. Make sure to check out the Instagram accounts, Lady Lexi Speaks Up, Facebook, Lady Lexi, and of course YouTube. And also, if you have the chance, check out the podcast. If you look for Lady Lexi Speaks Up, and also Lady Lexi's Monday motivational messages, then you'll find some stuff out there which might actually help you move forward when it comes to change and influence and clarity. And well, that's the whole goal behind it, right? That we know what it is we want to do and that we keep on dreaming, because without dreams, we're bound to go into depression. But when we do have dreams, we have something to look forward to. Want to see more Friday Night Lives? Then go there. Yes, go there, click on there, and you'll see more episodes.